They/Them was released on the 5th of August and was written and directed by John Logan. It stars Theo Germain, Carrie Preston, and Kevin Bacon. It's a film where they came up with the title first and then needed to write the rest of it. A group of teens attend a gay conversion camp when strange things start to happen and people keep dying. It's a slasher film, but unfortunately that aspect is the least interesting part of it. The psychological horror of the setting itself is enough to inspire fear, and there are some genuinely unsettling scenes. That, combined with the great performances from the largely queer cast, seems like a solid basis for the film. Unfortunately, the dialogue is often laughable, and while there's some bigger topics discussed, it's very surface level. The final reveal of the killer is also both expected and disappointing. There are also about 15 kids at the camp, but only half of them have names or dialogue. At the beginning of the third act, one character literally leads all of these background characters off set, never to be heard from again. Unfortunately, the film just doesn't have enough going for it. The kills themselves are decent, but nothing that hasn't been done before. There's a bizarre 3-minute musical number in the middle of the film, and I understand it's supposed to be campy and to show they're growing closer together, but it just comes across as totally weird. That describes a large portion of the film, and then it bounces between comedy, drama, and camp without ever settling down. This is not recommended. Orphan First Kill came out on the 19th of August. Directed by William Brent Bill, best known for The Boy, and written by David Kogashal, it stars Isabel Fuhrman, playing the murderess Esther. This is a prequel to the 2009 film, and though Fuhrman is 12 years older, they're able to hide it well. The big twist from the original film was the main character was actually a 33-year-old woman with a growth disorder, meaning that she only looked 9. Given how well known this has become, the film starts off telling the audience about it, and is allowed to have a very different perspective on it due to this. The film is slickly made, well acted, and has a good pace to it, moving from obstacle to obstacle for Esther. The new structure means it doesn't feel like a rehash, and the constant threat of violence allows for a good amount of tension. There are not many actual scares or creepy moments, mostly due to following Esther as the protagonist, but there's still some good imagery and a solid twist that shapes the second half. While the nature of being a prequel means the ending's already assumed, the exact path to get there is still interesting enough. There are a few effects that let the film down, especially the climactic scene in a burning house, which feels like they ran out of money, but they're not enough to detract too much from the greater story. Even without having seen the original, this is worth a watch. Barbarian was released on September 9th. It was written and directed by Zach Krieger and stars Georgina Campbell, Bill Skarsgård, and Justin Long. Tess, Krieger's character, arrives at an Airbnb at night in the pouring rain, but finds it locked and someone else already in there. Initially distrustful, she gradually warms to him, and the two form an uneasy friendship. It seems that something more may be going on though, as she wakes up and finds her bedroom door open. Investigating more, she finds a secret door in the basement and has to decide what to do. The structure of the film is fairly unique, with it being almost an anthology film. There is the premise, but then there's a cut to another character, and then another. Each offers a different tone and filmmaking style. These are very distinct, and when they intersect in the final act, it feels satisfying. This also helps to separate the comedy from the horror aspects, avoiding moments of levity that could take away from genuine scares. All of the main actors are great, especially Long, who does some amazing comic acting, while still being a deliberately slimy character. Some of the reveals don't quite add up, and the effects, while decent, seem almost unnecessary, whereas the best scares were almost entirely environmental. The ending ties it up well, however, with some tragic irony, as well as a relatively subtle look at the experiences of men and women in society. Highly recommended. VHS 99 was shown on September 16th. This is the 5th in the franchise, and a follow-up to last year's 94, which was a very solid collection. This one abstains from a framing narrative, and while it has been a weak part of the previous films, without it there does seem to be something missing. There are 5 segments to the film. Shredding, a take on punk rock jackass-style videos, features the group going into a condemned venue where a fire killed the last band that played there. It's unfortunately the weakest of the set, being overly long with goofy makeup and a bunch of unlikable characters. Next is Suicide Bid, about a sorority prank gone wrong. The concept for this one is quite frightening, and it works very well until they introduce the supernatural element with, again, Spirit Halloween makeup. All of these segments have this sort of setup, and it grows tiresome as the film progresses. Next is Ozzy's Dungeon, a fairly unique take on the Nickelodeon-style kids' game shows that grows dark. This is the most interesting of the bunch, though again, it outstates its welcome and the ending lacks punch. Gawker is straight out of American Pie, with a group of young teens doing pranks and then trying to spy on their attractive neighbor with a webcam. It doesn't do anything interesting with the concept, and just leans into mediocrity. The last segment, To Hell and Back, features a pair of friends assaulted by a demon who have to journey through hell to find something, called Ukaban, and return home. While there's some good effects in this segment, ultimately it's just the pair and the demon guide wandering from place to place, and then it's over. None of the segments really stand out this time, and overall it feels like this wasn't a best-of collection of shorts, but just the submissions for a film festival. Compared to last year's, with Ratma, A Funeral Home, Crazy Sci-Fi Experiments, and then The Militia Compound. Any of those would have been the best segment in '99, and it really feels like it's not exploring the medium or the individual concepts the best they could. This is not recommended. Resurrection was released on July 29th on Shudder. It stars Rebecca Hall, Grace Kaufman, and Tim Roth. Hall plays Margaret, a successful businesswoman and single mother. Things start to go downhill for her when an abusive partner from her past returns and she begins to have panic attacks. There's a fair amount of ambiguity about what is happening, and while some insane things do occur during the third act, it's all through an unreliable narrator. The film is a study on gaslighting and how past trauma can resurface. It has many similarities to Uma. Both feature a single parent isolated from the past, afraid due to their daughter moving out from college. When the things they've been avoiding resurface, it causes them to act rashly, driving away the one person they care about. Resurrection abstains from the explicitly supernatural elements, and comes across as a more intense character study due to it. The horror is not from generic spooks, but the idea this man holds such sway over Margaret, even after all this time. Hall offers another strong performance, a follow-up to the fantastic Night House. She delivers a near 8-minute monologue in the middle of the film, detailing her backstory, and it's an incredible bit of filmmaking. Roth also offers a chilling portrayal of a sociopath, someone who is so sure of himself that he can change events as they happen. The finale reminds me of May in some ways, offering a fantastical event that feels natural in the otherwise secular world. Highly recommended. Jeepers Creepers Reborn came out on September 19th and was directed by Timo Verdinsola and written by Jake Seal. Timo is best known for the Iron Sky movies, about moon Nazis. Neither is a pedophile, so the film has that at least. The plot is a couple is heading to a horror convention in Louisiana. They win a prize at it and are offered an escape room and a murder house, but the titular creeper has started his rampage and they have to try to survive. Previously I said The Munsters was the worst looking film of the year. I was incorrect. This surpasses it. The sets, especially the outdoor areas, look vile, and the CGI enhancements are anything but. The dialogue is particularly atrocious, with characters reduced to a single theme, repeated over and over. Even in the main couple it's the same. The guy is super enthusiastic about everything, and the woman hates everything. There's so little build-up and payoff in the film, with a number of things set up, and then they go nowhere. The creeper himself is a decent design and probably the best part of the film. Still, that's not saying much. The most interesting concept is the horror villain at the horror convention aspect, but that doesn't even matter. The creeper brings down the power at it, but then just leaves. There's no rampage or even further scenes in the area. It is truly awful, and even from a so bad it's good perspective, it's just boring. My Best Friend's Exorcism was released on September 30th and was directed by Damon Thomas, adapted from a novel by Grady Hendrix. It stars Elsie Fisher, known for 8th Grade, and Amaya Miller. Set in the 1980s, a group of friends go into a cabin in the woods and take LSD. One of them, Gretchen, gets lost in a murder house and possessed by a demon. This slowly starts to change her, including typical signs like projectile vomit and black eyes. It's a teen-oriented horror comedy and takes large inspiration from Jennifer's Body with some Donnie Darko. It's a fairly solid film, although it's clearly a film made for a certain demographic. While some are able to transcend that, this doesn't, with a huge focus on teenage drama and who likes who. This grows tiresome, especially in the second act, which drags on too long, with so much focus on how miserable the protagonist now is, as the demon and her friend drives everyone away from her. There's definitely a lot to like in the film, however, and the performances from all the young cast are very solid. The period setting works well, without feeling like too much nostalgia bait. There's even an 80s style Where Are They Now montage over the end credits, which seems very appropriate with the numerous John Hughes references. This is a situational recommend, as it really depends on someone's tolerance for teen relationship issues, but getting past that is a decent watch. Terrifier 2's theatrical release was October 6th. Written, directed, and edited by Damien Leone, it stars David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown, and Lauren Lavera and Elliot Fullman. While the first Terrifier was effectively a no-plot gore fest, this attempts to expand the methodology and have a lot more fun with the character of Art. In this, it largely succeeds, as whenever he's on screen it's a delight, with anticipated but still extremely effective gore. There's a certain point where blood and guts transcends reality and becomes Mortal Kombat levels. Almost every kill in the film is like that, with ludicrous situations and the attitude of yes and. One particular kill stands out, and it certainly stands toe-to-toe with the bisection from the first film. Other than the murders, however, the rest of the film tends to drag. This is especially true in the third act, when, despite having 2 children at his mercy, Art plays around with them for so long. All of this adds to a 138-minute runtime. Leone edited the film himself, and it's clear. Kill your darlings is a phrase in writing, and it seems he was unable to do this. Realistically, about 45 minutes could be edited without losing much. Despite spending so much time expanding on the lore of the world and the connection between the Mays siblings' father and his drawings of Art, nothing is ever actually explained, and some of the supernatural parts feel without reason. For those with a tolerance for gore, it is recommended, but there are notable problems that can't be ignored. Hellraiser was released 1 day later, directed by David Bruckner and written by Ben Collins and Luke Petrowski, who both worked with him on The Ritual and The Night House. It's the 11th entry into the franchise, and the first in a long time to have a large release. The plot is that recovering addict Riley breaks into an abandoned warehouse and finds the puzzle box that can summon Cenobites. After relapsing, she solves it, and is forced to sacrifice 6 souls to the box. She then tries to figure out where it came from and how to stop it. The highlight of the film are the gash of Cenobites, featuring classics like Pinhead, now more androgynous like the original novella, Chatterer, and the female Cenobite. Their designs are now less BDSM and more flayed skin. The practical effects from them are amazing, and the CGI shifting of the world that heralds their arrival evokes the best part of the original 2 films. Unfortunately, throughout their third act, they are kept out by the construction of the house and stand around menacingly, but once they're allowed to actually do something, it's suitably horrific. The film is unfortunately overly long at 2 hours, and while a secondary villain appears during the second act, it's not quite enough to revitalize the energy that has faded. The themes are also a bit lacking, with some ideas of addiction and the need for sensation touched on, but never addressed in a satisfactory way. There's no commentary, just ideas that are never quite fleshed out. Still, it's worth seeing just for the designs. Halloween Ends from October 14th, the finale in David Gordon Green's trilogy, co-written by him and McBride. The film is one of those hurt the most by its position in the franchise and the marketing. The plot starts with Corey, a young man who accidentally kills a kid he's babysitting. It cuts to 3 years later when he's still bullied and is working a dead-end job. He falls for Allison, Laurie's granddaughter, but after being confronted by the bullies he falls into the sewer and is taken in by Michael Myers, who shares his evil with him, and the two embark on a killing spree. Michael appears at 40 minutes into the movie and wanders in and out, but mostly out. The film is all about Corey until the last 15 minutes, where Michael takes a brief center stage for the final confrontation. The trilogy really only makes sense with this new one as the first. After Halloween Kills, Michael had just slaughtered 20 or so people, an entire angry mob, and Laurie's daughter. He seemed to be unstoppable. Then he apparently disappears for 4 years, hiding in the sewer the entire time. Laurie somehow forgets about him, and recovers from all her trauma and lives a normal life. None of it makes sense, and it really feels like they just wanted to forget that kills ever happened. Ignoring the kills problem, however, there is still the big final confrontation, the end of Halloween, not even involving Michael, except for at the very end. It feels like they had this side story, just like Halloween 3, then realized they needed to have Michael die to complete everything they'd been promising and building up to, so threw it in. Even the fight itself feels lackluster, like they're both half-assing it. The film taken on its own is not awful. The romance angle doesn't work, as it's a love at first sight, and Corey in general doesn't feel likable. He's just a blank slate, and there's not enough personality to latch onto. The evil spreading onto others idea has been explored in the franchise before, and it could work, but there are just too many scenes that feel awkward or accidentally comedic for it to truly feel like a cohesive whole. It may be worth watching just to see what happens, and that's definitely what they were relying upon, but on its own merits, it's not. Of these final films, Resurrection was my favorite, though Barbarian was the best. The worst was Jeepers Creepers Reborn, although, in terms of how much it hurt the franchise, Halloween Ends deserves special mention. I hope you've enjoyed these weeks of horror. I'll be back to regularly scheduled reviews and analysis next week.